How about this? New theme, new colors. We're freaking ready. I'm fired up. I'm pumped to talk about a lot of the things that we're adding to this new open prep cycle.
Yeah.
Open peak cycle, really.
I think before we get there, the most important thing that I would like to kind of communicate to our audience is during this time of the year, we are going to take care of every step of the process to get you ready for the Open and for quarterfinals. And then obviously for those that make it past that, we'll do another podcast for those that go into semifinals and beyond. But what I mean by that is we have a system in place, and Mia will talk about this for intermediate, where for those that aren't sure that they can make it through the Open to quarterfinals, we'll do a test and retest of each Open workout. And the week is planned. Everything is planned for you. All your mobility routines, your cool downs, and your warm-ups.
Don't take all my stuff.
Sorry.
What am I supposed to talk about?
Yeah. Sorry, Mia. I can't help it. So she'll talk about that. And then in RX, we're going to make sure that you're prepping for the quarterfinals. In Masters, we're going to make sure that you're prepping for both the Open and the age group quarterfinal, which, again, we'll get to all of those things. But it's kind of all there for you. We're putting it on a silver platter for you. You just have to sign up for the program.
It's basically an all-inclusive resort.
Exactly. Yeah, without the alcohol.
When do I get drunk? Oh.
We'll bring the alcohol once you make quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So let's go. We can jump right in.
Hold them to that, guys. Hold them to it.
It's going to be some really cheap stuff. The Costco brand. Have you guys ever had that? No? Okay.
Just a whole bunch of Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Just the premier members get the shirts, a.k.a. the alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Mia, you can go ahead and jump in with intermediate, kind of talk about how we'll prep for the Open, and then I think more importantly, what the process will look like during the Open time.
All right, so the intermediate path has been doing gymnastics progressions all year long. We've been progressing the level of difficulty, and now that we are prepping for the Open, I'm taking the approach of figure out how to use what you have. So the got none progressions, which are basic skill progressions, are still in the program for those of you who don't have skills, and we have a higher focus on muscle ups because those are worth so much on the leaderboard. So a lot of muscle up work, but also touching all the other gymnastic skills. If you don't have them, you'll continue to do them. But those of you that have the skills, our progressions in the past have taken those skills out of your Metcons so that you can really refine them. But now we need to take what you have and figure out how to use it under fatigue. So skills are all back in Metcons, and we're just doing Open style work to get you as ready as possible leading into it. Peaking for the Open for the intermediate path. So if you are not sure that you are going to make it into quarterfinals, or your goal is to make it to quarterfinals and you need to test and retest workouts, then you're going to follow the intermediate path leading into the Open, where we peak towards the Open, taper into the start of it, and then we're going to be doing test retest. So your entire week is based off of testing and retesting the workouts. This is the time of year where I feel like I always have to fight people to say, like, you have to kind of let go of your training volume and really focus on, like, this is your competition. This is what you've been prepping for all year. So don't go do extra running volume. Don't go do extra squatting. Stick to the program and trust that we're really working on getting you to get your best score as possible in the workouts. And that means lower training volume during those 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's really hard on athletes that I've noticed is, like, if their ultimate goal and priority is to do the best they possibly can in the Open and push to make quarterfinals, then, like, you're just going to have to be comfortable with feeling like you're in a 3-week long competition. And like you said, that just means you're not doing a lot of other training progressions. You're literally, everything you're doing in training is surrounding around supporting the performances in your first and second attempts of the Open workouts.
Yeah. Anchor your focus to maximizing your score in the Open, and then you can worry about your fitness, all the other stuff after the Open.
Yep.
If I'm unsure if I should follow intermediate or RX, because I'm kind of in that, maybe I just lower level-ish RX, or I'm not quite sure. Is there a way to know which one I should be following this time of year?
Yeah, it's completely based on whether or not you're going to make quarterfinals. So if you're on the bubble, or
what if I don't know, or is it that obvious?
If you don't know, then you need to follow intermediate path.
Yeah,
it should be pretty
that.
obvious.
Yeah,
most people know. If this is your very first Open, then follow intermediate path. Everybody else who has done an Open before, you kind of know.
Yeah, look at your past scores and you'll know how close you are. But if you were like on the 10% bubble line last year and you don't feel like you've gotten that much better, you should still follow intermediate. Now, if you're someone that finished in the top 2%, then obviously you'd still follow RX.
Yep. Yep, I agree with that. Again, I think it's just one of those, it's better safe than sorry if you're unsure, or maybe, this season of training just wasn't the best. And, everyone's been getting a lot more sick this winter, what I've noticed, relative to last year. And I don't know if it's like the removal of masks and immune systems weren't supported for it. But I think that if you're unsure, go with intermediate progressions. Mia's done a great job of setting up just the structure in the week to make sure that you can have the best possible performances throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be putting out demos and helping you with strategies. And I also include that in the videos that I put in specifically for intermediate strategies, which are very different than the open announcements where you watch 2 games athletes go at it. So I'm trying to help you maximize your score as much as possible to get you into that top 10%.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably like the most important part of the process is having someone help you pace, because to Mia's point, when you watch 2 games athletes and they do 21 unbroken bar muscle ups at the end of a workout, it's like that's just not realistic even for a good athlete. So if you're an intermediate athlete, I can only do singles on bar muscle ups, or I can only do doubles. How do I pace this workout? Mia's going to give you a strategy for that. And we actually did a podcast that will be coming out soon. Max and I talked about the most important skills to focus on for the Open. And Mia talked about this already too, but ring muscle ups and bar muscle ups are such a huge separator. And this past year, the difference in one muscle up was like 4,000 or 5,000 spots on the leaderboard. And there were 24,000 women that got 1 bar muscle up. So if you're someone that wants to make quarterfinals, but you can't do bar muscle ups, then you're already putting yourself outside the cut line with a workout like that. So making sure that you're focusing on those skills matters a lot, because once you get 1, then you're at 24,000, 2, you're at 20,000, then you just keep moving up the leaderboard for every single one that you can do. And that's not to scare everyone away from focusing on that, but it is to say, like, make sure that you're working on it constantly so that you're ready for that when they come out.
Yep. What's next?
Cool. Let's talk about RX.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to tag team this one because it's a lot.
Let's do it.
But I'll start with the strength work. So this cycle, just paying attention to what's been tested, previous quarterfinals, open. The big picture here, big idea here is that if you're in the RX, we're peaking you for the quarterfinal test. So basically, the open. I'm not saying the open's not important. We're still
sounds like you're saying the open's not important.
Maybe I'm saying that a little bit.
That's what I heard.
It's not as important. It's not as important as quarterfinals.
I'm just kidding.
We are going to train you to perform very well in the open, and you're going to do the workouts, and potentially if you want to have to repeat one just for the sake of, I guess, maintaining sanity, because we battle that every year.
Yeah.
Like I have people that are an absolute shoe-in to quarterfinals still repeat the open workouts, even though statistically you're like, you are fine.
Travis
I
has done
would
that.
challenge you to rise above that. If that's you. Challenge yourself to try to rise above it.
Yeah, not saying that this conversation is about whether or not we're suggesting that you do that, but I think the point being is that the main peak and focus is to get you ready for quarterfinals and to be at your best there. So that starts with a good strength progression. And start of the year, we're running a new strength cycle. It's going to be a little different than what we've done the previous cycles. If you've been following, what you're going to see is a good mixture of making sure that at this point we're still hitting all strength elements that could possibly be tested, but the format is not going to be so linear like it's been in the last few training cycles, where it's like Monday is the same squat progressions, Wednesday is the same lifting progressions. We're going to have similar to what we've done in the past, like a chaos style strength format, where we've got the progressions that we're doing, but they're going to be put in different days of the week to make sure it's a little spaced out, so that we have the space to make sure that we're hitting all of them throughout a training cycle, instead of it being so narrow focus on just a few amount of lifts. So what that looks like is we've combined things, what we call like our total strength progressions. And this is more so like paying attention to the fact that the CrossFit total was tested last year in age group. The other total was tested in quarterfinals. So we want to make sure that all the absolute strength lifts are getting some linear progressive format. But again, it's not done on the same day of the week. So you'll see progressions of back squat, strict press, and deadlift done in a format where it's like in 20 minutes, you're going to build to 85% of all 3 of them. And then the next session that you do that
sounds fun.
Yeah, it is fun. I like these style of setups because we're trying to make it more sports specific now, right? Like we're not just trying to do strength sets and, kind of keep you in this rigid box. We want you to start performing as an athlete with knowing what weights to choose, how to deal with time pressures. This is, it carries over way better into actually performing well in quarterfinals than it would as if we were just giving you ABC strength work all the time. So the other one will be bench press, pull up, and overhead squat, and you'll see progressions of that, of those 3 formatted throughout the week. So you might see this progression like every 10 days. You know, like Monday would be the first progression of those three of like, you know, back squat, press, deadlift, and then like the next Wednesday or the next Friday you'll hit the second progression of that. So they're gonna be repeated, but just not in the same format of doing them every day of the week. Tuesdays, continue to focus on strict and complex gymnastics movements with a finishing touch of upper body bodybuilding, just to make sure that joint health and range of motion, and making sure that you're also prepared for higher level skills that could possibly show up, you know, higher level skills, and also like uncommonly tested gymnastic movements like an L-sit or freestanding hands to hold, in those types of things. Wednesday.
Is it okay if after the bodybuilding you hit a flex and post it to your IG and tag us?
Yeah, we'll actually put some isometric flex finishers in there just to kind of top it off for the day. A little cherry on
get
top.
Stuck like
Yeah,
this.
it's actually really hard. Have you ever just sat in front of a mirror and flexed for like 30 seconds straight?
No comment.
That's a trick question.
Mia said no.
Definitely.
What a
Really?
good
should.
That's so
choice.
awkward.
That's what bodybuilders do.
Can
That's how they
we
practice
film
their
you
poses.
doing that after this?
No.
Me
Come
or
on.
her?
Her.
Yeah, I think we should film Mia doing it. All right, Wednesdays are going to have, I say Wednesdays, but once a week, there will be consistent snatch progression. So I want to make sure that we are peaking the 1RM. We haven't seen it tested in a little bit. So just making sure that we're putting a little bit more of a priority in that this cycle. This will be focused on developing 1RM snatch, and we'll have front squat volume progressions as well, because we've seen front squat tested pretty often. And I think it carries over into back squats as well. Like heavy front loaded squatting is just more difficult to me than loading on the back. And I think that, again, like we'll have the total progressions with the Monday, like the three that I talked about, where we work up to some tough percentages in back squat, but front squats will be volume focused. Friday, include a mix of fatigue-based lifting as well as barbell cycling and complex work. So you'll see this kind of alternated throughout the week. So one week it'll be do a Metcon and then build to like a high percentage of a snatch or a clean and jerk. The next barbell cycling focused session or fatigue-based session will be complex focused, something like 21.4 was the complex?
Yeah.
21.3, 21.4. Just working on, you know, complexes under fatigue, whether it be, you know, like Bella complex, we've seen it Rogue, or just getting different variations so that you feel really confident no matter what style of complex comes out, you've done it and practiced it. And then the third is heavy Metcons. So seeing repeated barbell cycling workouts with things like the last 2 years, you had heavy snatches in a Metcon with rowing and burpee box jump overs. So just making sure that we're practicing shorter sprint style workouts like that with heavy loads for snatch or clean and jerk.
When you time warp back to your early days of CrossFit, when you started doing fatigue strength work, so basically you do your Metcon and then you do your strength work.
Yeah.
Did you notice anything different? Like when you started finally implementing that versus just always doing your strength work beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, I think you condition to it pretty quickly. The first few sessions of doing it are really hard. You feel very weak, and it's like a shock to the system. But after you do it on a consistent basis, which is something that we're making sure that is actually put into the program, like once a week, you're going to build to something heavy after some form of conditioning. You get used to it, and you start being able to operate under fatigue to work back up to your higher percentages.
And I'm guessing I should lower my expectations there for a little bit. Like you're not going to hit your freaking best numbers
for sure.
For the day.
That's why like we do progress you into it. So we're not just going to say like week one you're building to a max snatch after a Metcon when like no one's done that. Some have been practicing it in training if it's a priority, and we do it on occasion in the last few cycles, but it'll be like build up to 80 or 85% just to like get used to it, and like again like it not be such a shock to the system.
Yeah, and even some of them are like you'll do a 7-minute hard workout, and then you'll have a 1-minute transition, and then it's on the minute for 7 minutes.
Yeah.
You'll do a squat snatch
like
at certain
those.
percentages.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's just giving you some exposure, and then at the end of the cycle, we'll test some heavier 1RMs.
Yep. And then the last day of the week, Saturday session, includes strongman, odd object implements. This is more so just to kind of create some roundedness to the training. Like we're doing a ton of barbell cycling. We're doing a lot of lunging. We're doing a lot of, you know, strength elements that are so specific to like the quarterfinal format, adding in a little bit of the strongman work and extra bodybuilding just to feel, to make sure that you're, you know, good and rounded throughout the week and making sure that bodies are staying
and that
healthy.
stuff's fun, right?
And it's just fun. It's just a good change up. And I mean, I've always seen, since I've been writing strength programs forever, I've always seen a lot of carryover with odd object work into other people's lifts, the main lifts, to help them get stronger.
Yeah.
So if you're hitting plateaus, these things are very, very helpful for you if you're someone who's kind of stuck training the same lift all the time, adding in these extra odd object elements and strongman work can really help you break through that plateau.
Yeah. And I think you may see some variation of strongman style testing in quarterfinals, and then certainly later on in the season.
They had heavy kettlebells for Masters last
exactly.
year.
And we have those in the program this year because of that.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. That's the strength breakdown.
So the CrossFit side of things, I mean, this is the start of the competitive season prep. So this time of year, we shift our training progressions to look and feel more like the tests that you'll perform on game day. So you can think about it as more AMRAPs, more for time pieces, 5 rounds for time, more chippers, and other common CrossFit style workouts. It's going to be much more CrossFit than what you usually will see in the program. So in other words, instead of it just being intervals or EMOMs or maybe only 1 or 2 CrossFit pieces, now 4 or 5 CrossFit tests every single week. We will vary those to create hopefully some health and longevity, just like Mike was talking about. We don't want to hammer you every single week to where you get to the open and you're beat up, but we also want to get you as much exposure as possible to the movements in the tests, the time domains, the combos that may come out in the open.
Yeah, we want this to be the best year you've ever had, but not at the expense of it ruining your career.
Right, exactly. And so I think that it's easy for CrossFitters to go too hard too soon and then be wrecked the rest of the season. We want you to go really hard, but we also want to make sure that you're recovering. So we have our movement mobility path for that, which we can get to in a little bit. So as far as the CrossFit structure goes, this time of year, just like the strength, we create a little bit more variance and chaos, but there's a base kind of an understanding by the coaches of there are certain types of tests that we need to make sure that we're working on. So the way that we wrote this is we went back and we looked at, for the last 12 years of CrossFit Open tests and now quarterfinal tests, we looked at all the time domains, the combos, and the styles of workouts. And we took percentages of all of those that have been tested, and then we essentially took those percentages and then put them into our training program. So in other words, if you saw certain combos 25% of the time, we're using those around 25% of the time, maybe a little bit more based on the biases that we see in the sport, and especially now with Bosman testing or programming the workouts. We put those into the program to make sure that we're fitting the same needs that will come up in the open and in quarterfinals. Now, Mike talked about this a little bit. For RX and for Elite and even for our regular option 1 of Masters, you're focused on quarterfinals and not necessarily the open. So what that means is in the training, we also have to have quarterfinal style tests. So it can't just be, 10 rounds for time of 8 ground to overhead and 10 burpees or whatever that workout was. It can't just be no bottleneck, high speed. We have that, but we also need to make sure that we have things like rope climbs. Mia talked about heavy kettlebells. We have some of that in there. Heavier dumbbells, box step overs, higher level gymnastics. Yeah, GHDs. All of those things will also be in the program because we want to make sure that not only are you ready for the open, but you're also ready for quarterfinals so that you can crush that. Because again, once you get there, it's now still about maximizing your score in quarterfinals. So the way that we looked at the year or the training for this time of year is making sure that we're getting a balance between open style work and quarterfinal style work. And then we pull that all together with, again, the I guess, biases that we've seen by CrossFit with certain time domains, 8 to 14 minutes being the most, or certain combos, the squat and upper body pulling being the most tested combo that they've had, or certain styles of workouts. AMRAPs being one of the most common that they've tested. And then the last thing is putting in some extra credit work that we identified as the most important skills to have during the open time. And Mia talked about this already, but we believe ring muscle up, bar muscle up is the biggest separator in the sport. Now, for the high level RX athlete or elite athlete, you're probably already really good at those. Yeah. But why not get a little bit better this time of year so that if, let's just say in quarterfinals, it was GHD, pistol, and ring muscle up again, you can do those ring muscle ups in 2 sets as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 sets like you did last year. So we will do ring muscle up and bar muscle up work under fatigue as extra credit work in the CrossFit portion. Yeah,
it's more so to make sure that training for those elements is included, because when we do it in a Metcon, it's a good training stimulus, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
So let's say that ring muscle ups are a big weakness and we put them in a Metcon once a week. But if it's only touched, in 15 reps in one of the Metcons that week, that's your only exposure for the week. And that's not really good. That's not really enough to get you better at it if it's like an actual true weakness and something that's holding you back. So we're making sure that we are still getting a training session for those that need more time on those movements.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second extra credit piece is going to be strict handstand push-ups. Again, this is, to me, looking at the data, this is the second largest or most important separator in the sport. And everyone knows this, even if you're good at handstand push-ups. if you fail in a workout, it's really hard to bounce back and just be able to continue to chip away. And we saw this in quarterfinals last year. There was only 10 strict handstand push-ups, but people, like, they got there and they really struggled to do those 10, and they lost a lot of placing or points. And the same thing has happened in the Open, either strict or kipping handstand push-ups. So there'll be dedicated extra credit progressions for strict handstand push-ups to make sure that we're getting resilient to the movement, creating some volume tolerance, but also hopefully getting you more reps in one big set so that you can do that in the Open. And then the last piece is going to be strongman and what we'll call like some pegboard or some just other odd object style work. Now, will we see this in quarterfinals? Probably not, but we will. I think that just in general, if you're better at, as Mike said, strongman style work, you're going to be better if kettlebells do come out or heavier dumbbells do come out. And so like holding a sandbag can actually translate over into something else that you're doing in the sport. And then pegboards probably won't come out in quarterfinals, but
I'm going to predict, throwing it out there, this is the year pegboards in semifinals. That's been my prediction.
I do think that you could see that, but let's just say that they weren't. If you're good at pegboards, you're going to be better at rope climbs. Like just being able to.
If they're not announced, you have to do the flex photo.
I didn't agree to that.
30-second mirror flex.
30-second mirror flex.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Front double by.
Flex my quads. Or
Yeah,
my,
I don't know.
my-
Quads and
my,
biceps.
We're going to forget. So come back to this video, leave a comment, and remind us if they don't announce pegboards, she has to do a 30-second flex.
Oh.
You have to hold your breath the whole
This is my
time.
nightmare.
So that's kind of that's the most holistic approach that I can bring to the table right now of what to expect in the CrossFit. As far as the linear progressions, you're not going to see those like you do throughout the year. So like if you've been with us, in the off season, Mondays maybe like we're just doing some wall ball progressions, and Tuesdays maybe a bunch of rowing progressions. Now it's going to be much more chaotic to Mike's point about the same thing with strength.
I mean, it's time to prepare for the sport. Like we worked the last several cycles, we've built the base and made sure that weaknesses were heavily trained, and now it's about preparing you for anything that could be thrown at you and building your confidence up, really. Mostly just going into the season or the start of the season feeling super prepared that you've done everything.
Yeah. And speaking of done everything, the last thing I wanted to point out is we have a movement checklist. So we have all the movements that have ever been tested in the sport, both in Open and quarterfinals, but then also movements that may come out. This is something I've talked about on podcasts before, but one of the things that I did last year, once we found out Bosman was going to be programming, I tried to pull up any workout I could ever find that he programmed, old San Francisco CrossFit workouts that were posted on CrossFit site that were attributed to him, and just collected all of that. And obviously, there's nothing new under the sun. Like I know people think that it's a lot of chaos in CrossFit, but in reality, there's kind of a small test, a data set of what's tested. But there are things that have come out that he tested or he programmed that are different than Castro. And so we've taken some of those things and we've also tried to put those into the program. So you may see some kind of different movements that you're not used to.
Has it even been officially announced that he's programming this year?
I think it has. I mean, he said that. So
okay,
yeah. And some of that will include single unders, speed steps, double under progressions, and crossovers.
You've definitely seen that in our throwdowns. We've made sure to add in the movements, the wall-facing handstand push-ups, and just starting to kind of trickle in the exposure to those things. Do we train them all the time? Because historically, it's really they've only been in there a couple of times. No, but enough to again feel confident to know that you have practiced it, and now you have confidence in your athleticism to deal with it when it shows up.
Right, for sure. Cool. Well, that's the CrossFit side of things. We still have our elite path, which we'll talk about in a second, and our masters. Mike, you want to just touch on elite strength real quick, and then I can jump back in for the CrossFit?
Yeah, I mean, the elite strength is following the same format that I went over for all paths. It's just more of it. You're going to have more training volume. You've basically... It's a standalone strength session. That's what separates the elite from the RX, highest level path, is that we take the whole strength session for that day and it's standalone. So we have more time to do a little bit more accessory work. Maybe like, the snatch days that I talked about, we've got percentage work followed up with some front squats, and then we'll actually have some snatch accessory lifts. In the RX, we're not going to have time for all that because we're basically writing it to be done in like a single session or possibly a double. But for the elite, the big strength difference there is making sure that there's extra accessory work to support the lifts that we're trying to train. And then also too, just more volume on the weekends with things like the odd object work and the carries and stuff that's trying to prepare them for the semifinal, strength elements that you would see tested there. So if you're following the elite path, you're assuming that you're going to make a semifinal. You feel very confident that you'll get there. So that's what these strength progressions are written for. Otherwise, I think go do the RX if you're unsure of that and you're a bubble athlete, because it's going to be more catered towards, again, making you your absolute best at quarterfinals.
Right. And by the way, for those that maybe are new to the program, we had plenty of RX level athletes. They did one session per day that qualified for semifinals last year. So you do not have to jump into elite just because you feel like I need more volume. I think that's important.
That's the big confusing one where it's like, I want to be elite, so I'm doing the elite, and it's actually not always the most helpful.
Right. I do think that you have these options, though, for those that maybe have a little bit more time. 1 week, you can do some of the elite progressions, or I'm about to talk about the endurance progressions. Maybe you add some of those in on the weeks that you have some downtime. But then for those that don't, RX is enough volume, and you're getting touches on all the same movements so that you will be ready for quarterfinals. And if you make semifinals, obviously you can transition to elite then.
Yes, sir.
Cool. So the CrossFit is, again, the same template will be used for elite, but to Mike's point, it'll be a little bit more. You're going to see heavier loads. You're going to see more semifinal style work. So you'll have sandbags and more rope climbs and legless work and pegboards and all the other stuff that you have to be really good at. But the focus is still going to be on crushing quarterfinals, because now, especially in the U.S. with the changes, I'm not really sure what the 60 athletes will look like for the East versus the West. And so we need to make sure that everyone is 100% dialed in. So we will still peak for quarterfinals to make sure everyone is ready to rock and roll. And then obviously, hopefully we can get as many people as we can.
Yeah, with another year of change, it's better safe than sorry. We just don't know what it looks like. So.
Yeah. The last thing is our endurance progressions, and these are written into the elite path, but they're for anybody that wants to follow them. Now, Mia talked about this earlier. During this time of the year, I honestly think that less volume is better. Focus in on the most important things and make sure that you have intensity in your training sessions and not necessarily just dragging out with volume. But there are some of these progressions that may help athletes based on the needs that they have. So, for example, on Mondays, we're going to have row priority for calories. This time of the year, I think it's really important to know what your cal pacing is going to be, because most likely it's going to be a workout with calories as opposed to meters. And so for most people, they know what their 500, I can hold a 2 minute over 500 pace for this long, but they don't really know what their calorie per hour pace is. So we have a test in there, and we'll retest it at the end of the training cycle. That's all about learning how to pace 4 calories on the row erg. Now, this may be really beneficial for the person that doesn't have any experience there, or just needs more endurance work on the row. And so you add that in as opposed to maybe the CrossFit session on that day.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a big thing in the sport that's missing is people can way underperform on machines because they don't know the machines well. And what I mean by that is not necessarily knowing their own internal pacing and gears, but more so unsure of when, new distances come out or different time domains on the machine or rower. They're not certain right away on exactly what pace they would hold.
Yeah.
Tuesdays, it's a good opportunity to practice that.
For sure. Tuesdays will be swim progressions for those that know they're going to make a semifinal. I think it's worth practicing that now. For those that are games level athletes, you need to be swimming all year round to make sure that you're competent. And for those that maybe just want a recovery session, this could be another good option to, take out the CrossFit portion of the day and you do a swim progression to make sure that you, again, are getting some work in, but it's a little bit lower mechanical stress than normal.
I would keep in mind that swimming piled on top of something else, if you are peaking for quarterfinals, is not recovery work.
Yes.
It should be replaced.
Correct.
Just note that.
Yes, that is very important. Wednesdays will be run volume, and then Fridays we'll have row and echo progressions again. We think that you'll probably see an echo bike in a semifinal. You'll definitely see a rower, and you may see an echo in quarterfinals. I doubt it, but it's still just worth getting some exposure on the bikes, both the C2 bike and the echo bike.
Do you think they'd warn before? Warn affiliates?
You would think so, but who knows?
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see it, but it's worth hedging our bets and making sure that people are getting exposure and just being well-rounded in the sport. You need to be good at all of those things, especially as a high-level
athlete. I thought it was
going
to come soon when they announce it as the official bike of CrossFit.
Yeah, that's true.
But watch we get the Versa climber and no one pays attention to that Fraser video.
Yeah.
I love those things.
2 more things I think that are important. We'll talk about movement mobility. I'll let Mike and Mia hammer that, but we also have our master's path. So we bring all of this up because we want to give you as many options as possible. So for those that aren't sure they can make a quarterfinal, follow intermediate. Make sure that you're focused on the open and peaking for that. That's what that path is going to be for this time of the year. For those that know they can make quarterfinals, that don't want to do 2 or 3 sessions in a day, you follow RX. Make sure that you're crushing that and you'll peak for quarterfinals. For those that know they'll make a semifinal, you would follow elite. So there's all these different options. And then for masters,
those who are old as fuck.
yeah. For masters, people ask me this all the time. Hey, I'm a 37-year-old masters, but I still follow RX. What should I do? This time of the year, maybe through the open, you could follow RX if you still want that style, that volume. But once we get into the actual open season, then you should move into move into Masters, because the Masters schedule is different. When Masters peaks for their age group qualifier, it's several weeks after the individual quarterfinal. So you have to keep that in mind, and the way that we structure everything changes. So the strength progressions change, the CrossFit progressions change, the extra credit progressions change. And so that's a really good time as a
your
Masters
bedtime's
athlete.
earlier.
Exactly. What you eat, your insure. So that is a good thing.
You can't make those jokes. I can make those jokes.
Sure I can.
Your Denny's discount stays the same. Don't worry.
I think every Masters is amazing. Don't listen to these guys. But it's a good time of the year to make sure that you're moving over into the Masters path so that you're following the correct progressions to peak you at the correct time. Boom.
Yep.
All right. Last but not least, movement mobility path.
Yeah. Do you want to go through each day of the week, or just, I feel like...
I think just touch on, everyone that's been in the program already knows what to expect.
All right. So, Monday through Saturday, we have different progressions with different, focus on body parts. This is written by one of our coaches, Kyle Habdo, who's also a physical therapist. He's done a fantastic job of giving you just basically splitting full body routines throughout the entire week to make sure that all the joints are, maintaining good, healthy range of motion, making sure that you're getting good recovery work in, and also too, just continuing to explore different ranges of motion that we're not always hitting through different planes because of the amount of, consistent movements that we do in the sport. So if you're someone who is very prone to injury or tweaky and maybe doesn't really understand like how to help self-rehab or repair the body on a daily basis, we highly recommend following this as part of your daily training routine.
And also for new people, this is something that every path can, you follow this in addition to.
Yeah, it's followed in addition to. It's about 30 minutes a day if you do it. It's a great resource. There's videos included. So a lot of new movements you haven't done before, so you'll enjoy the challenge. But I think it's been very helpful in keeping everyone healthy, especially as we lead into the season. So I cannot stress enough that make this a part of your daily training if you want to feel really good and perform at your best coming into the season.
We have a lot of people in the program ask for extra training on Thursdays, and I think this is, if you want to do extra training on Thursdays, I know this doesn't look like training, but this is more beneficial to you than giving you more aerobic work or anything else.
There's nothing wrong with feeling hungry to want to do more. I don't think you have to fulfill that desire all the time, meaning that if you're hitting Thursday and you feel like you're being lazy and that you have to get back into the gym and do some training, use that hunger to carry over into Friday and let this be the movement focus that you do so that it actually builds back up the energy so you can go in and attack Friday. Because I see those that are constantly asking for more all the time on Thursdays, I end up seeing them flat in the weekend.
Yeah.
Because they did not take advantage of that recovery day on Thursday.
Yeah. I would say always, you should much rather have the hunger to do more than the need to do less because you're so beat up.
Yeah. Well said. Cool. Okay,
Awesome.
Movement and mobility. But if you want to know more specific details on the actual breakdowns of what joints we're hitting, what body parts, in the cycle overview that we'll send out, it'll be in there.
Yep. We got a full PDF that we'll send out, and it will be in the link in this video as well, so you can check that out, go through if you don't want to listen to our voices. The last thing I'll say about the movement mobility path is Kyle wrote that with all the movements that are tested in the open and quarterfinals in mind. So for overhead positioning work for the snatch, he has stuff in there for that. For your squat position, if you have to do heavy thrusters, he has it in there. For pistols, he has it in there. So you're going to get exposure to all the different kind of movement styles that may come out and be tested in the open.
One thing we didn't mention too is that this is going back to quarterfinal prep, but we're going to have a simulation week. I think the second or third week of the Open. I'm not going to say an exact date on that because we'll announce it as we get closer, but this is an opportunity for one weekend that we have leading into quarterfinals. For those that are feeling confident that they'll be in there, we're going to have a simulation weekend where we build a small mini competition for the weekend to make sure that you're just practicing the format that they have most currently released on setting up to practice exactly how you would perform on game day.
Yep. We're excited.
Yep.
Let's go crush it.
Yep.
Open time, baby.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.